Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable Senate now resumes its sittings. I apologize for the late start, which was partly because our standing committee, looking at the standing orders, overran its time. We are joined this morning by 35 students and 2 teachers from St. George's College. I want to welcome you to this sitting of the Senate, to yourself and the teachers. And we are in such close proximity to you, you need to be spending some more time with us. So anytime at all you feel the need to come and observe how the Parliament operates, and in particular the Senate, don't hesitate to come and spend some time with us. Welcome again. There are 4 youngsters. In fact, 2 are here so far, Miss Amanda Nicholson and Mr. Isaac Lowe. And they are to be joined by 2 others, and they are participating in what is referred to as Children in Charge Day, under the theme of Encourage, Enable, and Include Me. And these 4 kids are being mentored today by members of the staff of Gordon House. One person is assigned to One person is actually assigned to the clerk, and they'll spend, I think, stand up please. There they are. I think Amanda was telling me that she's 15 years of age, and young Mr. Lowe, I think, is probably around the same age. So welcome again, and I hope that you enjoy your day. Okay? And you come and have lunch with me downstairs during the lunch and adjournment. That does not apply to the 45 students from St. George's College. Thank you. And we have 2 special, or in fact 3 specially invited guests who are sitting in the gallery with us today. The country was taken with the story of Miss Akeisha Green, who was recognized, or has been recognized by the country for an act of honesty. Let me say honesty in the face of temptation. And she's standing there with her young son. She's standing there with her young son, Joshua. So welcome. She's standing there with her young son Joshua, who is Miss Green's son. So, welcome. Now, I made it a point to invite to accompany her mother, Miss Yvonne Jones. Now, Miss Jones has been the subject of some adverse comment, but that is the nature of things. We say and do stupid things sometimes, but in the nature of the Jamaican personality and character, we forgive you and welcome you to the Senate this morning. I think that both leaders wish to say a few quick words.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome to everyone who is here, of course. And as we're celebrating Child Month and it's Child's Day, it is particularly, I think, a pleasure for us to welcome young people who are getting their education, focused on becoming productive citizens, our parliamentarians for a day, who are here learning about the Parliament, who want to encourage you for being involved and being engaged in the work of your Parliament, because it is, as the President always reminds us, indeed your Parliament, and this is where the laws of your country are made. So it's good that you're here today, engaging, learning more, and participating in the work that we do here. We welcome you truly. But we also want to pay a particularly special recognition to Miss Green, to young Acacia, who we had the pleasure of meeting earlier and experiencing the warmth of her personality together with that of her mom, Yvonne, who seems to be a little more shy. We welcome you as well, Miss Joseph. We welcome you and the family. And as we celebrate the honesty that Acacia has demonstrated and come to symbolize and encourage in Jamaica today, we want to also thank you, Miss Joseph, because she's your daughter. So those values came from somewhere. Yeah. And we know that is mommy, as Acacia had said, that nobody loves you like a mother. We know that those values came from you, so we celebrate you too. Miss Green, Acacia, I want to not only commend and congratulate you on the positive choice that you made the other day. They say the best indicator, the best way to tell somebody's true heart is what they do when they think nobody is looking. You thought nobody was looking, but you did what was right. You saw something that could have been an easy path to richness. And we know a lot of young people today, and over years, always looking for how to get rich quick. And it's never usually the right way. But you made a good choice. And what you have done, without even realizing it, is stimulated a new conversation across Jamaica about the importance of honesty. Here, here. It is one of the most simple and fundamental values to encourage in any human being. And you now embody for a whole lot of Jamaicans who have been looking at the pictures on social media, reading about you in the newspaper, and thinking, wow, this woman is a good woman, because that was a tough choice, and she made the right choice. So we want to thank you for the inspiration that you are for a lot of young people who look for direction in their lives. We want to congratulate you on your registration for a new course of training, and we want to wish you well with it, because we know that money can come and go, but an education that is always yours, and it's always your ability to grow. I know that Mrs. Wright at heart, she had said that she's hoping that you will be an ambassador for them, so that you will talk to young people and explain to them about the importance of honesty. I hope that's something that you guys are able to work on, because truly you have shown yourself to be an inspiration. So again, we wish you well, we congratulate you, and we thank you for the inspiration that you are. And we hope that you will also take some good advice with some of the donations that are being made so that you can make sure to put some aside and invest for your young children. And we know that you will invest them with the strong values that you yourself had. So again, we thank you for making the right choice, for demonstrating that honesty pays. And we wish you every blessing of God on the journey of your life. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Scott Motley.
Mr. President, I too would like to welcome all the visitors who are in the gallery today. It's so important that they are participants in what takes place here. And there are times when we do not inspire them, I think, but sometimes when they do keep us in check. Mr. President, the story of Miss Green touched our hearts. And I remember reading a quote from C.S. Lewis, who says that integrity is doing the right thing when no one is watching. I have begun to tell young people now that part of being in this new space, in this new world, is that if you aspire to certain positions, you have to live your life as though you're on camera all the time, because there are no secrets anymore in this world. I know that there are persons who have done this before. I remember that one a legal secretary, Dahima Brooks, who worked with me, found $1 million in an ATM machine in Portmore and called the security officer, and together they returned it, took it to the police station. But what I find fascinating about this story is that she was desperately in need. She had house had just burnt down 2 weeks before, I think. She had lost everything. She had to borrow $200 from her mother that morning. And that temptation in those circumstances to have a bag of money in front of you, it ought to have been that there was a conflict. That you would have said, boy, let's weigh this and see. This could fix my life. And I think that is why her story is so compelling to all of us, because those circumstances which she confronted, her adversity was upon her, and she did the right thing. How many people can do the right thing under difficult circumstances? So, Miss Green, you are an inspiration. You know, I think about your mother, and I know how your mother must have felt when she heard that you did this after you had to borrow $200 from her. But your mother must have instilled the best values that a mother could instill in a child for you to have taken that decision. I must say we are not accustomed to having children in Parliament. I'm delighted that you brought your son Joshua, because I think that what you do is that you're training him from now. This is a momentous occasion for you. As the leaders of government business said, we were both talking to you outside. And one of the things you said to us is, do you believe in dreams? Because you had so many dreams. I believe in dreams. I believe that dreams come true. But I believe your action and your decision is a pathway to having all of your dreams realized. Jamaica is behind you. Ms. Green, I'm almost sorry that we have made such a big deal out of what you did. It should be the norm. But it's probably your action now that will inspire other young people to recognize they have a choice. And the best choice is always to do the right thing. So, Mr. President, I thank you for having this thought. Your role in this acknowledgement must also be recognized. It is a fine gesture. And I just I just really want to say that I am inspired. I am inspired by your story. And I know so many people are, because I see the gifts that are coming into you. And I know from meeting you this morning that you will take advantage of all these opportunities, because you're a wise woman. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Just thanks again for coming, Ms. Green, and for bringing your mom and son and young son along. It was a pleasure seeing both of you. And prior to the meeting this morning, both leaders presented baskets, which Grace Kennedy was kind enough to present. So we acknowledge also the contribution of Grace Kennedy. Just before we begin the business of the day, I just asked the members of the Senate, no doubt you would have heard the Prime Minister's report on the condition of former Prime Minister Seaga, and I would just ask the members of the Senate in their own quiet way to keep him in their prayers at this time. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today is a copy of the annual report on audited financial statements of the Consumer Affairs Commission for the year 2017-2018.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. To the Honourable Senate, I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 14th day of May 2019, a bill entitled An Act to amend the Bauxite and Alumina Industries Encouragement Act was passed in the House of Representatives with one amendment. Signed, Pernell P. Charles, CD, JP, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Bauxite and Alumina Industries Encouragement Amendment Act 2019, read a first time.
Mr. President, I ask for second reading of the bill. I give notice of second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that in keeping with the resolution approved by this Honourable Senate on the 8th day of February 2019, for the composition of all committees of this Senate to remain unchanged in this session of Parliament, except by motion moved and approved by this Senate, that the names Robert Morgan, Ransford Braham, Sophia Longmore, Donna Scott Motley, Sophia Fraser Binns be added to the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate, and that notwithstanding Standing Order 66.3, that Senator the Honourable Pernell Charles Jr. remain a member. Mr. President, I beg to give further notice that at a later stage today, I will move for suspension of standing orders to take this motion.
Thank you, Minister. Questions and answers to questions.
President, there's one question on the other question paper. I've just consulted the minister. He says he's not ready. Could you give us an indication as to how soon you'll be ready? It's due for answer today.
Mr. President, might I just indicate that we are on our way to answering the questions, but I am asking for the Senate indulgence for us to have these questions moved to next week. We should be finished by next week, and we're going to attempt to get all of the questions concluded for that day. Of course, Mr. President, that really depends on how quickly I can get the responses to what I've asked for context within the week. So we're going to try for next week, Senator Brown, but give some permission for the matter to be responded to accurately. I want to make sure that when I respond to you, you have no further questions for the Senate.
Thank you, Minister. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, although the Food Storage Act, the debate on the Food Storage Act, or rather bill, was intended to be continued today, we will in fact not be proceeding with that item and will be taking only the National Contracts Commission Validation and Indemnity Act 2019. Mr. President, from time to time, bills have been brought to this House, or rather to this chamber, seeking to validate and indemnify the acts of persons who in good faith have undertaken statutory actions on behalf of the government of Jamaica, unaware of some flaw in the statutory framework or the regulatory framework permitting them so to do. And each time they come before us, Mr. President, we express some disappointment, regret, and even frustration that we are in such a position. Mr. President, at each time we ask that stronger efforts be made to ensure that this type of bill no longer become necessary. But regardless of our frustration, regardless of our regret or disappointment, our constitutional obligation, which is to make laws for the good governance and order of this country, remains with us. And it falls, therefore, to us as a Senate to take the responsibility with which we are charged in order to address the matter before us. Mr. President, the acts before us today, the acts to be validated and for which persons are to be indemnified, are of some vintage. They go all the way back to 1999. 20 years, Mr. President. 2 decades. So the actions to be validated have crossed administrations. They have been taken by, I would imagine, departments have changed, been refreshed, renewed, and all on a flawed understanding of their statutory capacity. So today we're asked to regularize actions taken in good faith, not all actions, but the actions taken in good faith over a period of 20 years. Mr. President, we're asked to protect the agents of the state who acted in faith on behalf of the government of Jamaica, unaware of a gap in their statutory authority. Stated formally, the bill before this Honourable Senate seeks to validate and confirm all acts done in good faith and inadvertent to the absence of statutory authority by the National Contracts Commission in the performance of its functions pursuant to the mandate granted to the Commission under the Contractor General Act in the registration and classification of prospective contractors. The bill, Mr. President, seeks to validate those acts done commencing on February 11, 1999 and ending on April 1, 2019. By way of background, Mr. President, the NCC was established under an amendment to the Contractor General Act in January 1999. The Contractor General Act was then recently substantially repealed by the Integrity Commission Act of 2017. But sections of the Contractor General Act, and members of this Senate should recall, sections of the Contractor General Act which related to the NCC remained and were renamed under the National Contracts Commission Interim Provisions Act 2017. Mr. President, on April 1, 2019, the Public Procurement Act 2015 came into effect.
And when it did so, it repealed the NCC Interim Provisions Act, ending the existence of the NCC, and brought into effect instead the Public Procurement Commission, which has now replaced it. And this is how the period of protection of acts was determined and sought under this bill. So February 11, 1999 is when the NCC was established, and April 1, 2019 is when it ceased to operate, and a new Public Procurement Commission came into effect. Mr. President, let me also say just a little bit about the acts we're protecting and how we find ourselves here. Under the Contractor General Act, Mr. President, further to its general mandate, the Commission was charged with the responsibility of carrying out certain functions, which included, among other things, registering prospective contractors and classifying such contractors according to the level and scope of the government contracts to which their registration applied. The Contractor General Act also provided that fees might be charged for services rendered by the Commission pursuant to the Act, and stipulated that the charging of such fees was subject to the approval of Cabinet. Cabinet approval was not sought, Mr. President. And furthermore, regulations ought to have been made to prescribe the form and manner in which such applications should have been made, the form in which certification of such registration and classification should have been done, as well as the requirements for and the manner of the charging and collection of fees by the National Contracts Commission in the performance of its functions under the Contractor General Act. The regulations were not made, Mr. President. So notwithstanding these gaps in its statutory framework, Mr. President, the Commission, seeking to pursue its broad mandate, began to register and classify prospective contractors and to charge and collect fees for these activities in the absence of statutory authority. So it must be clear to us the critical nature of this bill, the importance of this bill, given the sheer number of transactions that would have been undertaken by the NCC over the past 20 years, as they, in good faith, registered and classified contractors and charged fees for this service. And it is for this reason, Mr. President, that we now seek to confirm and validate such acts undertaken by the NCC during the given period. Mr. President, I will briefly go through the bill clause by clause. It is a short bill, and therefore this process should be relatively brief. The long title, I'll just like to direct members' attention to the long title as it encapsulates the purpose of the bill as I've explained it. The long title will fall away, Mr. President, once the bill is passed and receives the Governor General's assent. Mr. President, my colleague senators will note that the preamble, which commences on page 1 with the word whereas and ends on page 3, sets out the very facts that constitute the mischief which the bill is designed to remedy, and in so doing, Mr. President, also sets out the historical background of the actions of the NCC as it relates to the acts which this bill seeks to protect, to confirm rather, and to validate. Mr. President, the preamble also sets out the state of affairs that now exists in relation to the amendment of the Contractor General, again by the Integrity Commission Act in 2017, and its repeal of the National Contracts Commission Interim Provisions Bill 2017 by the Public Procurement Act 2015 when it came into effect on April 1, 2019, by way of reprise, Mr. President. Clause 1 establishes the short title of the bill, the National Contracts Commission Validation and Indemnity Act 2019, by which the Act may be referred to or cited, and Clause 2 is the interpretation clause and provides an interpretation for the term validation period, which is the period to which the bill applies. Mr. President, the bill is retrospective in nature, as it expressly provides, and Clause 3, Mr. President, contains a subclause 1, which sets out the validating provisions of the bill and specifically declares that all acts referred to in subclause 2, which were done in good faith and inadvertent as to their being without statutory authority during the validation period by the National Contracts Commission and other persons acting in support of the Commission were validly, properly, and lawfully done. Subclause 2, Mr. President, specifies the acts which were done and which are to be validated. And Mr. President, of course, this Honourable Senate will note for emphasis again that the acts being validated are those being done in the purported exercise of the functions conferred upon the Commission in relation to registration and classification of prospective contractors under the Contractor General Act and the National Contract Commission Interim Provisions Act 2017, including the charging and subsequent collection of fees for the services of the Commission in respect of the registration and classification of prospective contractors. Mr. President, subclause 3 sets out the indemnification provision of the bill and frees, acquits, discharges, and indemnifies from liability every person who may be liable to be proceeded against for having carried out the acts referred to in subclause 2 and which were done by the NCC and persons acting in support of the Commission, again for emphasis, Mr. President, in the performance of their functions in good faith, but inadvertent as to their being without statutory authority. Finally, Mr. President, the Memorandum of Objects and Reasons provides an overview of the contents of the bill and, in effect, restates the policy that guided the preparation of the bill, which is captured, in essence, in the long title, as I explained earlier. Mr. President, as indicated earlier, and as I am sure is clear to all members of this Senate, that this bill is a critical bill as we move on under the new procurement regime, which commenced on April 1, 2019, and we seek to essentially clean up what was done before. It is important that we pass this bill today. Mr. President, I thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Minister is right that this validation process, we have been through it over and over. When I sat on that side, Senator Gill recalled they tried to give me the nickname Good Faith because I was opposed to the first validation bill when I sat on that side as part of the government team. Because I don't like when we do wrongs, we come back later on and say, we have the power to correct the wrongs. I'm consistent. Whether I'm over there, I'm over here. I don't like these validation bills. We must do the right thing all the time. We must be like Acacia Green. Do the right thing. Don't need to come back and have it corrected. We must be like country Mr. President from the university night janitor who found the university cash payroll in the 70s in a dustbin and hand it over to the university authority. Because there are people among us who do good deeds all the time, who display a policy of honesty all the time. And I'm not saying that this validation bill raises issue of dishonesty, but it's well known if something is not lawful at the time when it is done, no matter the good faith, no matter the good intention, it can be quashed in the courts. But the Parliament has so much power that it can now sanctify that which was wrong. And this bill must be seen against the background, Mr. President, of small contractors. Small contractors, some of whom, based on a bill and a piece of legislation that didn't give the authority, those small contractors in 2010 were delisted, denied the chance of earning a livelihood. Delisted in 2010 so their family couldn't eat a legitimate food. So when we come to validate those actions, we must take into account the small contractors. And I want to commend Percy Latouche, who waged a battle for them until 2014 when they were reinstated by the previous government. So you're asking me to vote for to validate action which hurt some small contractors. But nobody tell me about compensation for those small Jamaican contractors, the majority of whom lives in this country, majority of whom never traveled on a helicopter yet. And I say that, Mr. President, because developing in this society is a view which says people too rich to be criticized. I don't share that view. I don't share that view. Your wealth doesn't put you beyond criticism. Your wealth doesn't prevent me from saying what Buju said. Country for sale. So when foreigners want to buy out my country, I have to ask myself, is my country for sale and those who are buying it are beyond criticism? And I raise that because nobody has talked about the small contractors who suffered for 4 years under this unlawful regime. That is the bill. So some people inadvertent to hurt small contractors. I personally cannot support the validation. I'm not saying the opposition won't support it, you know. I'm just saying to you that I want it to be recorded that this validation bill does not have Lambert Brown support. I'd vote no on it if we had a divide. We're not going to have a divide. You will carry this bill with your majority. But I want it to be clear. Nobody must expect to be doing wrong things. Next thing you know what we're going to be doing? Somebody make an unlawful cash deposit in a bank. And then we come and we validate that some years after. Somebody, Mr. President, maybe an unwilling seller, Mr. President, we discovered that such a sale was in contravention of the divestment rules of the country, of the cabinet, rules supported by the parliament. And then we come back now and say, well, you know, we have the power to do wrong things because somehow they can come to this parliament and ask us to validate that which was done wrong. I hope that there'll be compensation to those small contractors. I don't expect it to happen, but I hope somebody would say, hold on, we did them wrong when we delisted them. We did them wrong when they couldn't get a contract. No concern for them. But I'm bombarded that the contractor general must keep his mouth shut, that we in the Senate must keep our mouth shut, that the opposition must keep its mouth shut when we see things coming and people tell me it's a willing seller. How can a willing seller sell a property that values 16 million US for 7.2 million? And somebody say, oh, that sounds like a willing seller? No, that's a coerced seller. That's a meddled seller. That's a meddled seller. Because I, as a citizen of Jamaica, feel offended, just like the contractor general, insulted when I see what happened. But one day, not in this bill, one day we may be asked to validate such a transaction. because somebody discovered. And I'm not satisfied, leader on our side. I'm not satisfied that the Attorney General may have approved it, because the Attorney General also had approved as constitutional the needs. Am I correct, Senator Motley? So guess what? The people of this country need to be assured that there's not only one set of people who is going to be validated, but the poor people will get some validation in terms of compensation. And government leader, one thing that this bill tells us, because those who signed it then, who passed it then, felt it. I don't know if there's objection, I don't know if there's amendments being proposed and rejected, but it makes sense to listen to the amendments, to the varying bills being put forward, especially from this side. Because if we do that, the likelihood of coming for more validation bills in the future would be removed. So I make no bones in saying my duty to read the bills and make suggestions for change. And the similar thing by my colleagues is something we hope that in good faith, yes, in good faith, you will take into account and not just dismiss. We saw together, you and us put 268 amendments in the NIDS bill. Together, your side and our side. And yet the NIDS bill was so deficient. It was so flawed. It was kicked out unanimously by the Constitutional Court. So I'm appealing for tolerance. Hear what we say. Give thought to it. Give thought to it. Don't just dismiss it out of hand, because that's how we feel. You just dismiss it out of hand. We'll avoid more validation bills. So the opposition is not going to oppose it. But I personally, sorry? It's not my bill. It doesn't matter. It does. You see the point you're making? This is why you're so tied into the politics. It matters not who passed it then. Both sides must listen. That's the point I'm making. But you're like the Prime Minister. You're going to tell us that needs is something was talked about.
You know, Mr. President, and a point about Mr. President, I am sorry to have to chuckle at what Senator Brown is saying. But if he are you rising on a point of order? A point of order as to relevance, really, and the rambling that we are hearing. Because, Mr. President, if relevance of all of his rambling comments that he is making over there about needs and etc., just irrelevant to the bill.
Thank you.
And I want to point out to him, Mr. President, that this is a bill that was from 1999. And he is giving the impression, misleading this chamber, to give the impression as if this is a bill and the fault was a fault of this administration. That is what you are seeking to do.
Senator Brown, the point of order has been made in relation to the question of relevance, and you know what it is that you need to do. Would you continue, please?
Thank you, sir. I was longing to continue until the misleader intervened. I'm trying to be heard in silence. I want you to hear me, Mr. President, but the noise from there seems to be... You don't hear the noise? All right, good. I need to be satisfied, Mr. President. It's only the left ear that hears noise. So I'm comfortable with that. I appreciate the deficiency there. I'm finished.
Senator Brown, Senator Brown.
I'm continuing.
Senator Brown, no, it's okay. Watch this. Senator Sinclair, do not interrupt Senator Brown. All right? Continue, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may it please you, I am finished. I just wanted to be clear that tolerance is what I asked for. And secondly, to come and tell us that we support another point of order, I'm wasting time.
I would advise everybody to just ignore that, and I don't think Senator Brown. It was said tongue in cheek. Go ahead, Senator Brown, please.
Mr. President, it is such a short sitting that I am determined to lengthen it. But I'm finished. I've made my part.
Minister?
Thank you,
sorry, Senator. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, in closing, I just want to make a couple points because I think we have to be careful in this House about the things that we allow to be put on the record. One of the things that I want to, and it's the only comment that I'll make in respect of the NIDS, is one, that the amendments were 168, not 268, and many of them were simply repetitions of a single amendment based on a phrase that had been changed and was repeated several times throughout the bill. We should be clear and not mislead. And it's one thing to mislead the chamber, and another thing to mislead the people. It is so distressing to me every time I hear it repeated because it is in such bad faith because you were there. And you know what they were. When you don't, and this is a problem when you don't look behind the numbers, Mr. President. They can be funny things. The next thing that I want to say, Mr. President, is that we must be careful what we say about investment in this country. We cannot afford another good year. We are on a path to prosperity and job creation, and we do not want to lose jobs. There are thousands of jobs that are on the line because of irresponsible comments that are being made. And you cannot make them in this chamber and believe that it somehow makes it okay. There is no function of muzzling or wealth, but people who are in good faith, companies that are in good faith, negotiating investments that bring value and development to Jamaica, multiples of capital investment beyond the value of the discount made in the sale, Mr. President, multiples. The beach enrichment that requires capital investment that the government would be very hard pressed to find. The further development improvement to Ochereas, the town that would create a better place for our small vendors and persons who families who rely on the tourist industry. Thousands of jobs, Mr. President, that are on the line as a result of the irresponsible comments that are being made. It is not a function of not encouraging transparency and accountability. Those are necessary. But we have 5 people of the highest integrity who have scrutinized the transaction, Mr. President. And they have found that there is a valuable transaction. There is value on the table in the interest of Jamaica and its development. So I just want, Mr. President, I want to make it clear that we have to be careful about the words that we use. Investors, whether they be local or foreign, are important to job creation. When you speak loosely about them, you put the 1,500 direct jobs in phase 1 on the line, and the additional 1,000 or thousands for phase 2 on the line. People's livelihoods, Mr. President, on the line, and it just doesn't seem to people don't seem to recognize the importance of words and what they say. But Mr. President, we must love the poor and feed people poor because it's crazy. Mr. President, but the matter before us today, as I indicated, is about the validation and indemnification of acts conducted under the mandate granted by the Contractor General Act, as amended by the National Contracts Commission Interim Provisions Act of 2017. Mr. President, the acts we seek to validate were performed between February 11, 1999 and April 1, 2019, and I ask that this bill be approved. On reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. In favor? Aye. Madam Clerk.
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm All Acts in relation to the registration and classification of prospective contractors, including the charging of fees done in good faith and inadvertent as to the absence of statutory authority by the National Contracts Commission and other persons in the exercise of its function in purported fulfillment of its principal objects during the period commencing on February 11, 1999 and ending on the day appointed for the coming into operation of the Public Procurement Act 2015 to indemnify persons against liability arising out of their carrying out of such acts and for connected matters, read a second time.
The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Marshall. Thank you very much. I put clause 1. Those in favor? I put clause 2. Those in favor? I'm not hearing you. I put clause 2. Those in favor? I put clause 3. Those in favor? I put the preamble. Those in favor? I put the title and enacting clause. In favor? The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? Against? I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister? The question is that the bill be read for a third time. Those in favor? Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm All Acts in relation to the registration and classification of prospective contractors, including the charging of fees done in good faith and inadvertent as to the absence of statutory authority by the National Contracts Commission and other persons in the exercise of its functions in purported fulfillment of its principal objects during the period commencing on February 11, 1999 and ending on the day appointed for the coming into operation of the Public Procurement Act 2015 to indemnify persons against liability arising out of their carrying out of such acts and for connected matters, read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Minister, I think there was a motion that you had moved earlier to be taken now. The committee.
Yes, Mr. President. I move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Thank you very much. The members are aware of the motion and the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Mr. President, I now ask the motion be approved.
Heard the question. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business today. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Yes, the motion was approved. The question is that the Senate be adjourned to a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
The corrupt are getting away too often. Help catch them now. Jamaicans must call 1-800-CORRUPT.
Yes!
Enforce the law. One law for all.